What's going on, guys? I'm Chris and this is Regular Guy Training. Now before I get on with this video, I'm going to give you the time to switch over to full 30 or BitChute, because as I've said in previous videos, YouTube is absolutely allowed to do their thing because they are a private company. But at the same time, so are we. So me personally, while I'm going to be putting videos on YouTube and that kind of stuff, which is where most of my audience is, I will also be providing videos in other locations should you choose to not support YouTube, and rightfully so. Hey, just so you know, next week our Pistol 1 and 2 class at Bud's in Lexington, Kentucky still has a couple of slots per Pistol 1 and 2 class. So if you want to come out and train with us, sign up now. Now, moving on to the video itself. Okay guys, so you saw this a little while ago on a rifle, on this rifle, not too far back. And I told you that I'd be doing a review on it. Now that I've had some time to put a couple thousand rounds through it and see what the hubbub was about this individual optic, I believe now that I have at least a rather competent amount of data to give you guys basically like a user interface review on this whole thing. Now, as far as the optic is concerned, this is a Vortex. This is their UH1. And it's kind of funny how it's sort of nicknamed after a helicopter because it's about the size of one. Now, this is Vortex's attempt at competing with EOTech. Now, there are a list of reasons why a lot of guys really like EOTech. Me personally, as far as the reticles are concerned, I personally believe the EOTech to be one of the most shootable reticles in the world, honestly. And what this guy attempts to do is steal some of its thunder and essentially try and improve a couple of things. Now, does it succeed in doing that? Well, the opinion's up to you, really. So what I'm going to do here now is I'm going to show you an image of the reticle itself, and then we're going to talk about it. Alright, so here's the thing about this reticle, guys. When first looking through it, right, I was a fan of it over an EOTech, hands down. That's without shooting it. And the reason being was because, well, the 6 o'clock triangle and all that stuff was supposed to be for holdover distances and that kind of deal. And the segmented thing was supposed to make it a little bit easier to distinguish the reticle itself, like the outer limits of the reticle with the dot in the center, which is a 1 MOA dot, and all of that. And here's the thing, when looking through it, it seems superior. My personal opinion, though, is that while shooting it, the segmented sections and the enlarged triangle in the center, in the 6 o'clock of the circle, start to make the reticle a little busy when I'm trying to shoot a little bit faster. It's far easier, well, first of all, comparing it to an EOTech. With an EOTech, if you're shooting faster, the simple straight line, the simple thin lines in the reticle with the 1 minute dot in the center keep it from being busy. And with the extra edges and cuts and stuff in this reticle, it is actually possible to get lost in the reticle while shooting it. And while that is an individual training issue, I have used EOTechs a lot in the past, and it's something that immediately popped out with me when I started to use this. Now, Is that a big deal for you? I don't know. You're gonna honestly, if you want to see what it's about, you're gonna have to try and shoot a rifle with this optic mounted yourself to see if you like it. But me personally, while the reticle is certainly functional, for my individual taste, it is a little bit busy. Second, on the 6 o'clock triangle itself, right? That's supposed to be for close-up holdovers. And it doesn't quite work as a lot of people would lead you to believe. Now, 7 yards to about 20. Now, 7 yards to about 10 or 15-ish is perfect. Right, if I'm trying to hit someone in the upper chest at those distances, and if I'm trying to take a really fine shot at 7 yards, it works perfect. But here's the thing, a single yard more forward of or a little bit further back than 7 yards, and the tip of the triangle, the 6 o'clock triangle, is not accurate anymore. And for some, it's one of those things where it's like, well, now I'm trying to manage 2 dots. I'm just going to track the center dot and use my holdovers that way, which I thoroughly understand. And in all honesty, my personal opinion kind of leads in that direction as well. So as far as the reticle is concerned, I'm not a huge fan. Now, if I were to compare this to an EOTech, it certainly does its very best, but as far as the reticle is concerned, which was the main thing that it was trying to improve over the EOTech, I view that, in my personal opinion anyway, I view that as a failure on Vortex's part. Now, as far as field of view and stuff like that, a lot of optics companies have 2 different ways of approaching it. On the one hand, you have aimpoint T1s where they want to extend your field of view by making the optic body so small that it's not really in your vision. It kind of fades away as far as the tube thickness and all that is concerned. This goes the exact opposite route in making the optic very large and the windows so large that when you shoulder the thing, the optic body is out of your line of vision. Me personally, I don't really have a stake, or rather a dog in that fight. I don't really care. As long as I can line it up and shoot the thing straight, we're good. But, so to that end, I didn't notice any field of view issues, which is fine. There is a little bit of a tint, like a greenish tint on the glass. It's not crazy by any stretch, but there is a little bit of one there. And you'll notice this as well. The brightness adjustments are about on par with an EOTech, which is just fine to me, right? Now, a unique feature that this individual optic has is that you guys see the USB port here. Now, if you have rechargeable 123 style batteries, what you can do is there's a little plug-in that you can use for this, and you can essentially put in rechargeable CR123 size batteries, and while they're in the optic, and then you go ahead and hook them up to their charging station, you can essentially hook this up like you would your phone at the end of the night, and you're good, right? Like it'll charge it up and keep it going. Now, if you decide to go a regular lithium battery route, you go straight through to this compartment, which seals very, very tightly, and I appreciate that fact. A single 123 into the side of the optic is going to work just fine. Also, there's a dummy wire in place there, so you can't lose your cap. So that's neat. Included with the optic is its own quick detach mount. I'll put it this way, right? When discussing the quality of the mount itself, actually the vast majority of mounts, once they're locked down, they're on and they'll stay on. Right, they'll keep your zero, you won't have any issues and that kind of thing. However, a lot of guys take a lot of stock or have a lot of varied opinions on whether or not an optic is really close to returning to zero once you've taken it off and then put it back on in the same spot. Now, me personally, I like mounts that are very very close to returning to zero if I take the optic off and put it back on. Mostly because it's just less of, you know, it's fewer rounds that I have to fire. But other than that, it's really not that big of a deal for me. I will say though that this mount does not accomplish that at all. When you've pulled this thing off, I've done it a few times, and each time it was off several inches at 50 yards, which is kind of a big deal because now, you know, at 50 yards it's quite a few clicks over to the left or right or whatever. So again, take what you want from that, but me personally, I'm not a huge fan of the mount that comes with this. However, I see eventually someone coming up with a aftermarket mount for this because the mount itself is removable. Now, as far as controls and all that stuff, while looking at the buttons on it, they work just fine. You press both of these at the same time to turn it off, you press either one to turn it back on, and after a certain number of hours it shuts itself off. There's no auto shut on feature, which I kind of wish that it had, but it is what it is. Probably the biggest reason why it doesn't have a auto on feature is because it says about 1,000 hours worth of battery life. So not real great, but on optics like this, you're not going to have fantastic battery life because using a holographic type sight demands a lot of, comparatively speaking, demands a lot of power. So you're not going to have a ton of battery life to start. But with this guy individually, I mean, so long as you stay on top of the batteries and whatnot and make sure if you're using it for home defense, the second you go to touch it, you press a button or whatever, you should be good. Now, here's the thing, I personally wouldn't use it for that. I would just go with like an aim point or primary arms or something like that to basically completely remove that issue altogether. But, you know, again, some people are gonna be okay with it, some people are not, so it is what it is. Now, here's my biggest issue with this optic, right? Here's my biggest issue. Okay, I'm going to press real hard on this right here, and I'm going to get this as close as I can to the camera. Listen very carefully, right? So I'm going to put my thumb into this elevation adjustment, right? And I'm going to press real hard into it and listen very closely. You can adjust these with your thumb by just pressing into them, and they're exposed. Okay. That's a gigantic no-go for me. Because here's the thing, over time, okay, over time this thing is going to recoil a lot. It's going to send a lot of shocks into the optic itself. And if it's easy for me to press into that and turn it with my thumb, these will start to move eventually. Okay. I've got a couple of thousand rounds through it so far and it hasn't given me any problems. But like I said, eventually you're going to start chasing zero, especially if you shoot a lot of volume. Okay, that is a big deal for me. It's not so much that stuff will get in here and turn it, even though it's entirely possible because finger tension can turn the elevation and windage adjustments. But what I'm more worried about is doing a bunch of shooting with this thing, hanging it up for the day thinking that it's good to go and my zero's off because the detents that keep these in place have wore out and it's starting to randomly spin. And again, if I can do this with simple tension on my thumb, then that's a problem to me. If I were to compare this to an EOTech, for instance, which I'm not a huge fan of the exposed elevation and windage adjustments, but at the very least, I cannot do that to those optics. Does that make sense? So at this time, it's one of those things where it's like, I see a future in the optic, I truly do, but that is a huge problem to me. So yeah, I mean, sorry to end on a sour note for this thing because I had really high hopes for it. I like it. When I'm behind the gun, it shoots very well. It's really easy to snap up on target fast with this thing. I finished assembling this guy together and I started calling it Ricky Bobby because you just like to go fast on it, especially with the huge brake and the holographic sight that's on there. But like I said, being able to turn that with just your thumb sends off huge alarm bells to me, and I find it a little irritating that Vortex didn't see that to start, or at least try to recess them or cap them in some way. That doesn't make any sense, and I personally will not recommend this to pretty much anybody, because it's one thing if it held zero and it didn't do that and all that other stuff. Me personally, I'm not the hugest fan in the world of the reticle, but I would sit there and be like, oh well, if you're a plinker, a competitive guy, or if you're one of those dudes that's on SWAT teams or whatever that makes entry into houses, well, dude, this optic is an option for you. But I can't really recommend it to anyone, me personally, because if you're going to be doing some shooting with it, honestly, like in the words of Travis Haley, if you don't have a good zero, you don't have shit. Okay. And over time, stuff gets worn out. And over time, this thing is just not going to hold zero because it's got to take shock and all that stuff. And eventually, the detents are going to simply wear out. So, especially if it takes that little tension to turn an elevation or a windage screw. You see what I'm saying? So, hopefully, Vortex will address these complaints and rectify the issue. They're starting to come out with some pretty good optics now. Particularly their magnified stuff, and hopefully this is just one of those things that got past the engineering eggheads and it'll be fixed. But as of now, this thing's a dud. So I appreciate your time, guys. If you want to come out and take some training with us next week, okay, we're going to be going to Buds for Pistol 1 and 2. There's still a couple of slots open for that, and there's a bunch of other courses that are open that still have slots available. For some, it's like there's 1 or 2 slots here and there, but for the most part, most of them still have slots open. There's a bunch that are sold out, but you know, that's the nature of things. So I'll leave a link in the description below for that if you're inclined to come out and take some training with us. If you want to support us through Patreon, honestly, I'm grateful for it, right? Because it affords soldiers to come out and take training with us for free, because we use that money to pay for their food, their flight, their ammo, their gear, guns if we have to, and we bring them in and train them up for nothing, right? And whatever's basically left over at the end of the month, we end up using right back at the channel. It's basically what afforded the ammo for this test here. So, you know, it is what it is. And honestly, if you want to throw $1 a month or a nickel, doesn't matter. It goes a lot farther than you realize. Now, for those of you that want to get something out of that, aside of just throwing random money at us, if you hook up with us and put in $35 a month, you're a part of our free tuition. Well, you're a part of our tuition-free program for the most part, because if you're paying $35 a month, that's your tuition, obviously. But while you're on that program, you can take as many classes that you want from us for as long as you're signed up to that. And all you have to do is a little bit of math, and it ends up paying for itself incredibly fast. Especially now, since our new classes are charging $250 a person, right? So that makes a ton of sense, and it's something that I wish that I had when I was going through all of my courses and stuff. It would have saved me truckloads of money. So there's that. If you want to join the discussion group on Facebook, you can certainly do that. And really, that's all I got. Links for everything are in the description below. And remember, guys, a regular guy's firearm is the last defense against tyranny. Be easy.